Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. The first story: sales director had a fit, because now no one was doing quotes for him. The second story: a supervisor dismissed my warning that an essential shift on the weekend was not being covered, and scolded me for always begging for more shifts. The third story: client did not know how to use the camera, and I taught him. And the first story is: lay off a third of the team and expect us to work harder? We will see about that. So this happened sometime in the 2010s, somewhere in the UK. That's all I'm revealing. I worked for a medium-sized PLC in a small team that worked with the sales department getting quotes. I had previously worked in another team in a different department in the same company as well. So to set the scene, the company had recently had some issues with regulators and senior management were either oblivious to the damage they were doing or didn't care. They were trying to save costs, but going about it all the wrong way. So my team consists of 6 team members and a manager. We were fairly busy and often helped out on other teams as well, and they would in turn help us. This is important for later. So we are all called into a meeting without warning and told that due to the declining work tickets, they were laying 2 of us off. They did say 2 people were saved, the manager and his sidekick. They made us reapply for our jobs, including doing a test, following the letter of the law on redundancy, which had nothing to do with our roles. It also became apparent during the process that the company flat out lied, or at the very minimum manipulated the data used to come up with their conclusion of falling ticket numbers. They dropped by 13 from year 1 to year 3. Bear in mind it was a total of several thousand tickets a year. In the end, the company carried on, and 2 team members were removed and made redundant, one of whom took a golden handshake. The other sued the company for various things, not really worthy of mention here, and won. After the dust settled, it also became apparent manager secured his sidekick's position, despite him being the worst member of the team in terms of work done and work quality. So in the weeks after, the entire team were too busy to help other teams, who then stopped helping us, so a huge backlog of tickets also built up. We also gotten threatened with disciplinary proceedings if our backlog didn't come down, but was also refused any overtime. During the process, we had also been admonished for skipping steps and getting quotes. Steps that often took a significant amount of time and served no purpose. So me and 2 others remaining, not including sidekick who had his nose so far up manager's rear end it came out of his mouth, decided to do everything by the book, down to every last bullet point. This made the backlog of work even worse, but they couldn't say anything. One week we had another meeting with HR, the sales director, and our manager to discuss the issues. We all calmly said we're sorry, but we have to follow the guidelines and rules laid down, and this is as fast as we can work. We were also asked to start helping out the other teams again, as we should be team players. Again, we said we're sorry, but we can't. Our workload is too high, and it's also not in our contracts that we have to do other teams' work. This went on for several months, and management still refused to believe we were overworked. When it was time for holidays, we realized they hadn't changed the amount of people allowed off from 3. So we all booked holidays. They both went abroad, and I decided to visit family the other end of the UK. Of course, when manager realized, a week before, he went nuts, and another meeting with HR was called. We all calmly said sorry, but we checked the rules for our team, and 3 people, out of 4, manager could do what he likes, can be off at any one time. And again stood our ground, and all went on leave for 2 weeks each. This caused even more chaos at work, as you can imagine. The sales director after this hatched a plan to get the Indian teams. We had offices in India and other offshore places, to be trained up by us and to help us. However, they demanded we fly out to spend weeks there training them. Again, we all refused, as it's not in our contracts to be trainers, or to have work abroad. They ignored the fact I didn't have a passport at this point, so poor old manager and his sidekick traveled out and trained them for weeks. Eventually, both stayed for over 2 months and failed to train them. We would send low-effort tickets to them, and they would screw it up, and we simply said, sorry, to fix this we need to do it again. So after 6 months, they gave that idea up entirely. After around a year or so of this, I'm being deliberately vague on timing, so please don't ask about it. We all decided to all seek other employment, having found we all could not trust the company or manager anymore. And we all found roles elsewhere within a week of each other, so all handed our 4-week notices. Again to the letter of our employment contracts, and were due to all leave on the same day. Now, the female member of the team, who is a very learned person, and she revealed in all our contracts any documentation we create is ours, and we can do with it how we wish when we leave. So we hatch a plan. In the final week we're there, we move all our digital stuff to one location, including all my manuals and cheat sheets from my previous team. They both did the same with their previous positions within the company. On our final day, we bring in our own external drives, and with IT's help download and removed all documentation, and deleted the copies on the company systems. We all said our goodbyes, and at the end of the day quite happily told our manager what we had done. He exploded and demanded it back, and we calmly tell him not according to the letter of our contracts this, waving the drives at him, is ours, and we choose to remove it with us. So to clarify this, I didn't think it needed more when I wrote it. As we were an internal-only team, i.e. we never spoke directly to customers, all our documents were created by us and used only by us. The contract stated only publicly available docs were company property. We found a loophole and used it. They did have backup, however as far as we know the manager never asked for them. I know the IT guy there, and he said they never asked. Also, as per our contracts, all those documents were our property, so if we found out they used them, we could have demanded they stop. We were later told by friends who remained that the sales director had a fit, because now no one was doing quotes for him. Gladly, we all have had great new places and keep in touch. The second story is, you won't heed my warning about a shift not being covered over the weekend? Have a nice weekend. I work in an office, and at the time I was the new guy who only worked part-time, taking shifts here and there when needed. I could do pretty much anything, and did it well, but often had to ask around for extra shifts to make ends meet. One day our supervisor went on short-term disability leave after an accident, and an assistant, let's call her Brenda, took over the job, which included the scheduling duties. Brenda was easily overwhelmed, and we believe that she was too proud to admit that she needed help. She had to plan the schedule for 5 teams, and I'd often tell her that I'd be available for more shifts to cover X or Y, as the slots were clearly empty. She was always pretty dismissive, and most times I'd end up not working more. People tried to work around her mishaps, so there was never any direct impact on the overall production. One time I noticed that a lone position on the weekend, that nobody wants to do when that person lady was sick or away, was not being backfilled, even though it was essential to have someone in that chair. Hoping for extra shifts, I sent Brenda a casual email to bring her attention to the fact that the shift was not filled, and if she had plans for that yet. Her response was an extra long email on work ethics and respect for my colleagues' time, that I'm new here and I should learn my place, to stop begging for extra shifts all the time, and that she had nothing else for me that week. Duly noted, ma'am. QMC. My last day at the office that week was Wednesday, and I knew that the shift had still not been filled. When I left, I wished everyone a nice weekend, including Brenda. See you next week. It's important to mention that I was on call. They couldn't just put me on the schedule and expect me to show up. They'd have to confirm with me beforehand. I got many calls on Saturday, about 30 minutes after the beginning of that shift that was not being covered, asking where I was, why I wasn't in. The error alerts were being sent all over the country because nobody was there to do the job. I told the weekend manager that I was out of town, as I wasn't on the schedule when I left on Wednesday. They'd need to take it up with Brenda. Monday morning, I was called in a senior manager's office. I was told that they were giving me a written warning because I didn't show up to work that weekend, and it caused a lot of trouble for other managers. I pulled the email thread and was able to prove that I warned Brenda that a shift was not being filled, that I would be available if needed, but that Brenda made it clear she didn't need me. They then checked the log to see when the schedule was last changed, and yup, Friday afternoon, long after I was gone. I made it clear that she made no attempt to try to contact me. The senior manager apologized, and I was able to return to work. I don't believe Brenda was specifically punished, as we're all allowed mistakes, it happens, but she was eventually demoted. She retired probably a year after the incident. I ended up being promoted to full-time shortly after, and as it turns out 10 years later, I'm now office supervisor, doing a much better job at managing schedules. My contract at the time, you don't owe us any availability. We don't owe you ours. You're available when we ask you to be. Schedules are posted 10 days in advance, and we have to let you know if we need your service. They specifically didn't need my service for the weekend, so I left. Edit to add info I've mentioned in the comments. For the on-call portion, our union works in a way that if you're not a permanent employee, they have to call and book you. The schedule is posted 10 days in advance, and they let us know in advance the days they'd need us. Sure, there were emergencies and sick days, but some of the part-time people had more than one job and couldn't be expected to be available for a call 24/7. Sure, there were emergencies and sick days, but some of the part-time people had more than one job and couldn't be expected to be available 24/7. If they needed me, they had to notify me that I was being added to the schedule. Otherwise, I'd organize my time accordingly, and they'd run the risk of me not being available, which is pretty much what happened. I don't know if Brenda was disciplined. Those records are confidential. It's very possible, which might be why she ended up being demoted, but our union has very stiff rules about how to go about it. There's a process to improve employee performance if they're not good at their job. Only at the end of that process can people be demoted. I know now that it's a grueling process that has to be thoroughly documented. Managers couldn't simply fire her. I still believe that Brenda was not maliciously trying to target me, but rather she was not competent enough to fulfill her new responsibilities, and got defensive when the new guy pointed out flaws in her work. She blew up at that and forgot the valid point that I was trying to make. The way I see it, she realized too late that she messed up, and fixed it the way she knew how. After all, when she left, the schedule was clean, even if one crucial step was not completed. So yes, she was inefficient, and other colleagues regularly had to clean up her mess. That time, it was me. The last story is, the proof that you're just a bad photographer and your new camera is great? If you insist. This was over 15 years ago, when digital SLRs were first becoming somewhat affordable to anyone who wasn't either wealthy or a professional photographer. I was in high school, had been a budding photographer for years already, and working in a small retail photo supply shop. I had a customer who appeared to be in his early 60s come in one Saturday and spend over an hour demoing just about every camera we sold. I honestly looked forward to those customers because it made the time go faster, and I generally enjoyed talking shop with people. Eventually, he settled on one that we both thought would suit his needs, and I rang him up. A few nights later, he comes back. I've already been given a heads up by the store's owner that this guy is called ahead, and he is peeved. When the customer arrives, he immediately accuses me of selling him a camera that's either broken or simply not good enough for what he wants to use it for. Taking pictures of his grandkids, who like most tiny children, are not always sitting perfectly still. It's too slow. It takes the picture after the kid's already done something. Every photo is blurry, etc. I take him at his word. I have no reason not to, and examine the camera, changing some settings and snapping a few pictures as I go. I genuinely cannot find anything wrong with it at all. As gently as I can, I try to tell him that it may be a combination of using the wrong settings on the camera for what he's trying to photograph, while teaching him the right ones, and maybe a bit of slow reflexes that will develop with practice. Keep in mind that I'm young and terrified of losing my job, so believe me when I say I'm as delicate as I can be with the whole situation. But that was the wrong answer, apparently. His solution? Okay, hotshot, let's see you make it work. I'm gonna wave my arms back and forth over my head, and I want you to take pictures when they're straight up. He insists this will prove that the camera is too slow and can't take a sharp picture. He hands me the camera and starts doing his best wave your hands in the air like you just don't care right in the store. Snap, snap, snap. I hand the camera back and let him review the photos, each one showing the exact moment he wanted me to photograph, perfectly sharp and in focus. He didn't say another word. He huffed, hastily shoved everything back into his camera bag, and stormed off. Sorry, sir, just doing what you asked me to. Subscribe, hit the like button, and have a good day.